Hello guys and welcome to a new Wargame video today by me Vulcan. Today I'm doing a PACT infantry tutorial and I'm going to be going through every single infantry unit that the PACT can field. Now I'm going to be starting with the Spadochroniager. Now these particular infantry are known as paratroopers, that's the literal translation I believe, and they are the first Polish unit I'm going to be looking at today. Now, like all infantry units, their assault rifle has 525 meter range. They have a HE power of 1. This is the same for all infantry units. The only thing that varies is the accuracy, suppression and fire rate. They have an accuracy of 8, which is reasonable, and a suppression of 54, which is very good for an assault rifle. They have a 225 round per minute firing rate, which has a 50% rate of fire buff because they are veteran squads, I believe. Now, this is all part of the hidden stats. I will leave, again, the hidden stats information in the description. It will be a link to the official Wargame forums where they have a changelog of where some units, since the beta, got a buff on their rate of fire, which isn't shown in the armory. It's a hidden stat, and it's only for particular units. Now, for this particular PACT tutorial, I'm going to go over every single unit that does have a buff. And the reason I didn't do it for the NATO was because NATO has a lot of elite units, so they have a lot of units with 100% rate of fire buff, and they have even more with a 50% rate of fire buff because the NATO units are very infantry based. They have a lot of good infantry, whereas PACT not so much. So they don't have as many elite infantry units and they don't have as many veteran infantry units, so to speak, and therefore there isn't as many to mention, and therefore I can mention every single one that has it. And the Spadochroniager is a one with 50% rate of fire buff. So this means that they fire roughly 350 rounds per minute, something like that. The RPG that they have is a reasonably good one. Accuracy of 8 and an AP power of 14. This is going to take out light to medium armor. The accuracy is not going to be anything special. It's pretty mediocre, but at close range it's pretty much always going to hit. So there's that to think about. But you have a heat rocket. Every heat rocket in the entire infantry lineup has 525 meter range, and if we go over to the machine guns, you can see that the Spadochroniager have a CQC machine gun, the RPK, which has a range of 875 meters, an accuracy of 9, and a rate of fire of 461 rounds per minute, plus the rate of fire buff of 50%. So this is what makes the Spadochroniager a really good choice. They're cheap, 15 points, and they have a CQC machine gun. Now, for taking over towns, this is exceptional, and having a CQC machine gun rather than a stationary machine gun is very, very useful. Now, I don't believe that units with a stationary machine gun can actually fire on the move. Only CQC machine guns can, which makes them extremely good at assaulting towns. Now, obviously you don't want to just go straight in with your infantry. You will always want to have some sort of support to help them get close to the town, otherwise they're just going to get owned by the defensive troops, because the defensive troops will always be in very heavy cover if they're in a town, and therefore always, if you attack a town, you're always at a disadvantage unless you do it with a little bit of help from napalm or tanks and stuff like that. So never do it alone, but the CQC machine gun will help you a lot. So that's definitely what makes this squad good. They have a strength of 10. They are very small, like all infantry squads, and the optics are basically all medium, except from some of the special units that I'll mention later on. The elite units have good optics, like I believe the only two units are the Spetsnaz and the FJB. Now, the stealth on these units is good for all infantry units except from the two-man squads. Now, in terms of what you should bring the Spadochroniager in, you can bring them in the Star 266 if you want to drop them off in a safe area. However, I would recommend bringing them in a Scott, purely because the Scott is extremely fast and it does provide good fire support. You can even go as far as to get the Scott 2AM, which has its own HGMs with accuracy of 7. Now, these units work really well on their own, so if you bring them in and you don't necessarily want to use them to attack a town, for example, then you can just send them elsewhere and hide them in tree lines and use them to ambush enemy units. And the fact that they're very, very fast is they can reposition very quickly. Now, the AP power is only 10 on these particular vehicles, so be wary of that. You can also bring in the Spadochroniager in the Mi-8Ts and the Mi-24D. I would only recommend doing this if you were going for a specifically mobile deck or you needed the heavy firepower from the Mi-24D. Now, moving on to the Saperzy Sturmowi, and these guys are the first flamethrower squad that I'll be looking at today. Now, flamethrower squads are completely useless in Wargame Airland battle, really. The only time that I've ever seen them be useless, or useful, sorry, is in a forest situation. So they come across the infantry in a forest and they spray them with flames. That's the only time that they're ever good. Else, they're just going to get churned up by enemy infantry, and it never really ends well. Now, basically, these guys have more or less the same AK as the Spadochroniager. It's just they don't have the AT weapon and they don't have the machine gun, but everything else remains the same. But don't take them, they're not really worth it. Now we've got the first HGM unit for the PACT side, the PTRS Faggot. This is a reasonably good AT weapon, but the trouble is it's a little bit expensive for how good it is. It's only got 11 AP power, and the accuracy of 8, this is on the HGM, is not great. The range of 2,450 meters is okay, but it's gonna let you down because some HGMs fire a little bit further, so 2,600 meters. And that can catch you out, but you don't really have to worry with HGM infantry as such because they're good at ambushing enemy troops. And if you get them that 200 meters closer, then they're going to have less time to run away. Now, there are some things you have to bear in mind about HGMs. The suppression and fire rate of all HGMs is exactly the same. The stealth of this HGM squad is very good. That is because they're a two-man squad. But they have the VZ-58, not a great assault rifle, but you never want to rely on the assault rifle while taking specialized squads. You always need to have something defending them on purpose. Now, to bring these guys in, you can go for the Tatra 148. That's a decent truck to get them in with. Or you can choose to bring them in the OT-64A, which is basically very similar to the Scott 2, just a Czech variant. Now, you can also bring them in on the OT-62A, 62B, 62 Vidra, and the 62 Vidra 2. Now, these can be useful, like the Vidra 2 is very, very useful and can be used in its own right with the support of the HGMs. So if you want to go for a very offensive strategy, the Vidras can take care of themselves because they have this 30mm cannon which can attack both ground and helicopters. Moving on to the FJB, this is the first elite unit that we're going to be talking about today. The optics are good, as you can see, and that basically tells you that they are specialized units. Now, these are the only infantry unit in the game with both AA and AT weapons. They come with an MPI AK-74N assault rifle with an accuracy of 11, which is extremely good. The suppression is lacking at 39, but the rate of fire is 225 rounds per minute, and that is doubled because they have a 100% rate of fire buff. The Strela 2M has a range versus helicopters of 2,100 meters, range versus airplanes 1,680 meters, accuracy of 6, and a HE power of 3. Now, I was saying on the NATO side that the HE power of 3 is not good enough, and that's because a lot of the Mi-24s that are on the PACT side have a HP of 10. So they take at least 4 shots to shoot down with a HP power of 3, which is ridiculous. However, when you take infantry on the PACT side, you've got to remember that NATO helicopters are actually a lot weaker. The only helicopter on the NATO side which has a health of 10 is the Chinook, the supply helicopter. The Apache has a health of 8, so that's going to take only 3 shots to shoot it down with a HE power of 3. But the rest of the units have at least 6 health or below. And that includes all the Cobras, all the heavy hogs, basically any other helicopter that you can think of on the NATO side has either 6 health or below. And that means it's only taking 2 shots from most AA units on the PACT side. Now, helicopters aren't exactly NATO's strong point. I recently used some heavy hogs, and they can be useful in certain situations. But PACT AA infantry is extremely effective because NATO's helicopters are so weak. So HE power of 3 is pretty much all you need. The thing you really need to worry about though is the accuracy. And the accuracy of this Strela 2M that the FJB have really lets them down. They only have an accuracy of 6, which is a 30% hit chance at max range. And that's not very good at all. They only have 4 missiles, so that's going to get used up very quickly. And if you're only hitting, like, say, one out of those 4 at max range, it's not going to go down too well, and you're not going to be able to take out many helicopters at all. Now, they do have a reasonable AT weapon, the RPG-7, with an accuracy of 8 and an AP power of 14, good for light and medium tanks. But it's just so mediocre. The only thing that really makes these guys really good is the fact that they have the double rate of fire buff. Now, they do also run very fast, and they do have the good optics, so you can kind of use them as recon. But in all honesty, I don't find a use for these because they're not specialized enough in a specific role. So by this I mean they've got both AA and AT. If they were a specialized elite AA unit, that would be awesome. If they were a specialized AT unit, that would be awesome. But they're not. They're like a bit of both. And it kind of lets the whole unit down. But if you're really interested in bringing them in, then really go for either the SPW152K. Now, the reason I tell you to bring them in this is because not only will it keep them alive because it's an armoured vehicle, but the road speed is 150 kilometers per hour, which is very, very useful compared to the truck, which is only 110 kilometers per hour. And if you want to bring them in with helicopters, then I would go for either the Mi-8T, or if you need something more heavy, then you can always bring them in one of the Mi-34s, Mi-35s, Mi-25s, or Mi-24s. Now moving on to the Flak Strela 2. Now this has the same Strela AA piece as the FJB-40, except from they're a specialised unit. They only cost 5 points, and they can be useful for dotting around the map. Now, I do kind of like these units because obviously you can just spread them around and they're very cheap. But also because you can use them to bring in more effective APCs. For example, you can bring in a crappy AA unit, which you can just put off to the side somewhere, which may attempt to shoot something down on occasion, but you can bring it in with a BMP-2. And the BMP-2 is probably one of the better APCs on the PACT side. So if you're going to get a BMP-2, then it may as well bring it in with a squad of infantry. And it has an accuracy of 9 and AP power of 19, a very effective AT weapon versus tanks. So it can be very useful. Also, the 30mm cannon that comes with can deal with units at close range. So if you want to bring these guys in, think about bringing them in with a heavy APC, or you can just bring them in Urals and dot them around the map. Either way, they're not going to be too effective because they only have 4 missiles, but you can always rely on them to deal that little bit of damage, which may force enemy helicopters away. Okay, so we're moving on to the Lekka Pehota now, and these guys are okay. They're kind of like the Panzer Grenadier squads from the NATO sides. They come with the KBK AKM, which has an accuracy of 6, which is kind of abysmal for an assault rifle, but it has a suppression of 54 and a rate of fire of 225. These guys don't get any rate of fire buff, but they do have an HGM in their squad. And this is what kind of makes them like a Panzer Grenadier squad, because basically you get a normal infantry squad, which is decent at fighting other infantry, but it also has an HGM, which makes it good for dealing with both infantry and any armoured targets it comes across. And because normally it's going to be coming across some quite close range, 1,575 meter range for the HGM, it's going to be reasonably good. It has an accuracy of 9, which is 45% hit chance, and the AP power of 15 is going to enable it to deal with those kind of heavy targets, which is very, very nice and can catch out quite a lot of players because they see a 10-man squad and then they suddenly realise there's an HGM flying at them. Now the PKM, very standard weapon, 875 meter range, accuracy of 8, HE power of 0.5 and suppression of 54. This is basically the same on every MG, the HE power and suppression, so there's not too much to worry about. But the 461 round per minute rate of fire is not too bad at all, and can be helpful. Now, to bring these guys in, I can always suggest bringing them in the Scott 2AM if you want those sneaky HGMs to support your own HGM infantry, but these guys are normally good alone, so you can bring them in the Scott 2s to get them up to the front line fast, or you can just bring them in the Stars. But obviously be careful about where you unload them, and they can get killed very easily. So now moving on to the first larger squad that you can get with the PACT units. Just going to swizzle the camera around here. You can see that we actually have 15 men in this particular squad. They have an AK-74 with an accuracy of 9, a suppression of 39, which is a little less than some of the better suppression values, and the rate of fire of 240 rounds per minute. Now these Morskaya Pehotas do have a 50% rate of fire buff. They have the RPG-7V, which has an accuracy of 8 and an AP power of 17, very good AT weapon. And the PKM they also have with the accuracy of 8, and it has a range of 875 meters versus ground targets. Now the rate of fire again on that PKM is given a 50% rate of fire buff, so bear that in mind. But the good thing about these guys is that they have that strength of 15. That's what makes them really, really, really good. And a lot of people underestimate these kinds of units because they cost a lot. A lot of people kind of shy away from them, but they can be very, very useful. I once showed a video of me using a 15-man squads. I'm not sure if it was these particular ones, but basically I charged over a hill on the big 10v10 map Ragnarok, and I basically camped a spawn point. Because these guys are so effective and they have such a large squad, they're quite hard to kill, and it allowed me to just camp the reinforcement point and destroy tons of units without them being destroyed themselves. So that's where they can work out really, really well, and they're also very good at overrunning the enemy. However, bear in mind that they do cost a lot. And if you are going to bring them in, make sure you bring them in as something either defended, like the BTR, just so that they stay alive, because you don't want their Urals to be blown up and then you lose half the squad or even the whole squad. So make sure you have like an APC to go with them, so bombs are a little bit less effective with their AoE effects. Now moving on to the Moto Streltsy. These guys have a VZ-58 assault rifle, accuracy of 6, a suppression value of 54 and a rate of fire of 225 rounds per minute. They have an RPG 75 with an accuracy of 10 and an AP power of 12, and they also have a rate of fire of 20 rounds per minute on that AT weapon. They also have a UK VZ59, which is the longer range machine gun on the PACT's infantry, with a range versus ground of 1050 meters. Only has an accuracy of 6, but a rate of fire of 461 rounds per minute. These are your ultimate defensive troops. They have a very good AT weapon at close range, which can take care of light and medium vehicles. Their long range machine gun means that they're going to be able to open fire before the enemy even get close, which can whittle down enemy squads and allow you to get a numbers advantage early on. Now that is very, very, very useful. They do only have a strength of 10, but they, like I say, they're very good at defending because of the long range machine gun. Now if you want to bring them in with anything, you can go with the OT-62 Vidras or the OT-62B with the recoilless rifle. This can be very useful for taking care of enemy infantry. Else, bring them in the Tatra if you're going to use them in places that you know you can get to and defend. So basically you use the trucks to get them up to the front line, you drop out your motor Chelsea and you put them into houses and then you drive the trucks away. If you know you can do that without being attacked, then just go for the trucks. Else you can either afford a OT-62A, which is an armoured vehicle, nice and cheap, or you can maybe go something for a bit faster in the form of the OT-64A. But I think this APC, if you buy a unit with APCs that are more expensive, most of the time it's not worth it. For that AA unit that I was talking about earlier, that can be used as an opportunity to bring in the heavier APCs. But in terms of Modus Chelsea, because they have such a high availability, you want to be able to bring them in quite cheap. So now we're moving on to the Motor Key. These guys are a little bit more offensive troops than the Motor Chelsea. Basically, they have a PKM, which is a little bit better at attacking at closer ranges because obviously the range is shorter, and their assault rifle has one more accuracy. So they're a little bit better at attacking troops, but their RPG-7V is very good at taking care of good armor units at close range. So these can be very useful units for using in forests where you can flank the enemy, because if you come across enemy infantry, they can take care of themselves with the PKM and the AK-74, and they can also ambush the enemy armor easily with the RPG-7V. Now to bring these guys in, you can use the BTR 60PBs if you want the extra fire support, or you can use the Urals if you intend to walk them a long way. So now we're moving on to the Lebitsky Beretti. These guys are very, very good at attacking towns. They are the ultimate CQC troops. They have a CQC RPK with an accuracy of 9 and a rate of fire of 461 rounds per minute, but they also have the 50% rate of fire buff, and this can really help with their assault rifle, which only has an accuracy of 8. They have a rate of fire of 225, which is increased to around 300 rounds per minute because of their buff, and they also have that high suppression, which makes them decent at stunning enemy troops when attacking. Also, they have an RPG-7, which allows them to take care of armor, and a strength of 15, just like the Morskaya Pehota. They're not as good as Spetsnaz, but they are the second best PACT infantry versus infantry squad that you can get. Now, the only thing you have to be worried about is what APC you bring these guys in. Now, because they're Polish, they get access to some of the Polish APCs, which can be quite good, like the Topaz 2As and the Promet. Now, the Promet is an extremely effective AA and anti-ground unit. It's basically like a smaller APC with an AA mounted on top of it, and you'd be surprised how fast this thing fires. It has a 23mm cannon on it, which can fire 1050 meters versus ground targets and 1925 meters versus helicopters. So not only does it provide your ground attacking troops with AA, but also ground fire support, which is extremely important when attacking into towns. So if you're approaching a town and you know that there's not too many HGMs here, the Promet can be an extremely effective choice. Else, if you don't want to spend too much money, you can go for the Topaz, which it only costs 5 points, or you can go for the Topaz 2A, which will give you a little bit better fire support with the recoilless rifle, the Tara Sneeze. Now we're moving on to the PALR Faggot. This is a very similar unit to the Faggot that I've already covered, which was the PTRS Faggot. You can see that they're basically exactly the same. The only difference here is that the PALR Faggot squads have a stealth of good and not very good that other two-man squads have. I believe it's the only two-man squad that doesn't have very good stealth, which can let them down, and when they get spotted easily, they do get killed very easily because they're only a two-man squad. Now we've also got the PPK Faggot here, which is again a very similar unit. It's basically exactly the same again, except from the assault rifle's called something different. Now, basically again, the only difference between these two, the PPK Faggot's got that very good stealth, the PALR Faggot doesn't. Now you can use both of these to bring in quite heavy units. So for example, with the PLR Faggot you can use them to bring in BMP2s, and with the PPK Faggot you can actually use them to bring in MI24Ds or even the Promets, which can be very useful. So bear that in mind. The Promet is very nice APC to use, and of course MI24Ds, if you need them, can be very useful. So there you go, that's the end of part 1 of my Wargame Airland Battle Infantry tutorial for the PACT side. Hopefully this has been useful, and hopefully you could have learnt something. Part 2 will include the rest of the units on the PACT side, plenty more to get through, so look forward to that. And thanks for watching, hope to see you in the next part, and goodbye.